The hum of voices in the Grand Assembly Hall quieted as Jackson Reed stepped onto the platform. His heart beat in his throat, but his face was the very picture of calm resolve. Before him, the vast Galactic Council, representatives from over 30 species, sat in tense silence, all eyes fixed on Earth's lone diplomat. The holoscreen behind him flickered to life, showcasing the bright blue of Earth, the cradle of humankind. Humanity, Grand Speaker Valter's voice boomed, cutting through the silence like a blade. His dark, imposing form towered above the others, his 4 arms folded in contempt. It's time to end this farce. Your kind has been given opportunity after opportunity to comply with the Galactic Accord. You have proven time and time again that you are a threat to galactic peace. Submit. Or face the consequences. The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of finality. Jackson swallowed hard, feeling the piercing gazes of thousands of species weigh down on him. Sweat trickled down his spine, but he held his ground. Earth was not going to bend to this, a species so young, so raw, so damn proud. The humans didn't submit. They never did. This is a mistake, Jackson said, his voice steady but firm. You think humanity is a threat because we fight. But you don't understand us. Not yet. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some of the delegates whispered among themselves, their alien tongues buzzing like wasps. Others looked at him with a mixture of disgust and curiosity. Jackson could feel their condescension like a physical pressure. Valter's lips curled into a sneer. You're nothing but a backward species, human. You've been warned. We've given you every chance to comply. Jackson's grip tightened on the podium. The words seemed to echo in his mind, reverberating off the walls of the chamber. You think we're backward. That's why you don't fear us. But you should. He stepped forward, meeting Valter's cold, unblinking eyes. You want war? We'll bring it. Straight to your doorstep. The room went silent. The air seemed to freeze, like a moment suspended between life and death. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't back down. His words, though bold, weren't bluster. The weight of what he was saying pressed down on him like a storm cloud about to burst. Jackson, Ailey Ven's voice broke through the tension, low and urgent, her sharp eyes scanning the room. You can't just. He held up a hand, silencing her. He didn't need her caution right now. The time for diplomacy had passed. What do you propose, Jackson Reed? Valter's voice was almost amused now, as if toying with a mouse who'd just lost its footing. More empty threats? Your species has no hope against the might of the galactic fleet. Jackson didn't flinch. We might be outgunned. But you underestimate one thing about us, we don't quit. We don't bow. And we will fight to the last. You may take our lives, Valtar, but you will never break our spirit. Ailey's gaze softened. She knew him better than anyone, and her worry for him was visible. But Jackson was beyond reason now. He had already chosen his path. The air hummed with tension, the weight of the moment settling into the bones of every delegate. They were watching a human draw a line in the sand, and daring the universe to cross it. A long silence followed as Valtar stared at Jackson, eyes narrowing. Then, you shall face the consequences. But be warned, Reed, he added, his voice a cold threat, this is not just about you. Earth's defiance has just made it the target of every fleet in the galaxy. The war you seek will not be on your terms. It will be on ours. Jackson's jaw clenched, his blood running cold, but his resolve only hardened. This was more than just a diplomatic failure, it was a challenge to everything humanity stood for. As Jackson turned to leave the stage, Ailey followed close behind, her face a mix of concern and something deeper, something unspoken. Are you sure about this? She whispered, voice barely audible as they walked through the hall, the murmurs of the council still ringing in their ears. Jackson's eyes were locked ahead. They think we're weak. I'll show them how wrong they are. The gravity of the situation hung over him like an invisible shackle. He'd just made a declaration that could lead to the extinction of his species, but he didn't regret it. Not for a second. It was humanity's time. Time to show the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The air in the corridors of the Galactic Council building was stifling. Even though the architecture around them was vast and sterile, Jackson Reed couldn't shake the suffocating weight pressing down on his chest. Ailey Venn walked beside him, her eyes flickering nervously from side to side as they moved deeper into the heart of the council complex. "You're insane, you know that, right?" Ailey muttered, her voice low enough that no one else could hear. Jackson didn't answer at first. He simply kept his pace steady, his thoughts spinning in 1,000 directions. There were too many possibilities, too many consequences to comprehend. But there was one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't let them cower Earth into submission. "We had no choice, Ailey," Jackson finally said, his voice rough. "They weren't listening. And now, they'll know we're not just a footnote in this galaxy. We'll make them understand what humanity is capable of." Ailey huffed but didn't argue. The tension between them was thick, but Jackson was used to it. He was used to going against the grain, pushing forward even when everyone else told him to fall back. His eyes flicked to her. The alien woman had a deep loyalty to Earth, just as he did. But sometimes, she didn't understand the risks he was willing to take. "You know they won't stop, right?" she continued, matching his stride. "The galactic fleets will come. They won't take a single step back after today. You've made this personal." "I didn't make this personal. Valtar did," Jackson snapped. He had never been one for sugarcoating his thoughts, but now his words felt sharper, heavier. "If they want a war, they'll get one. We'll fight for Earth, for humanity." They rounded a corner, and the dim lights of the hallway flickered slightly as they entered a briefing room. Jackson stopped, the door sliding shut behind them with a soft hiss. The room was cold, the only warmth coming from the sleek, polished surface of the table in front of them. A holographic display flickered on, showing images of Earth's current military capabilities and tactical positions. Jackson knew it wasn't much, far from it, in fact, but it was what they had. "I know," Ailey said, studying the data as the screen zoomed in on Earth's defenses. "But we're not prepared for an all-out assault. You think they're going to play by the same rules we do? They'll send fleets that outgun us 1,000 times over." "We'll fight," Jackson repeated, with a calm finality in his voice that spoke of an inevitable truth. He leaned in, analyzing the projections in front of him. "Humanity fights dirty. That's the one thing they don't get. They think they can overwhelm us with numbers and technology. But we'll show them that you can't break a spirit like ours." The door slid open, and Colonel Gareth Yates entered, his stern face locked in a permanent scowl. His uniform was impeccable, the insignia of Earth's military shining with stark clarity on his chest. He didn't speak as he walked toward the table, his boots clicking sharply against the floor. "You're both mad," he said bluntly as he joined them. "But I don't have time to argue. We've got work to do." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Glad to see you agree." Yates didn't smile. "I don't agree with anything you said, Reed. But I'm not about to watch Earth get wiped off the map. So let's get to it." Ailey crossed her arms, her gaze moving from Yates to Jackson, then back again. "The fleet can't mobilize in time. They're already advancing. What's your plan, exactly?" Jackson leaned forward, his fingers tapping against the cool surface of the table. "We take the fight to them." Yates frowned. "Take the fight to them? Are you out of your mind?" "I'm serious," Jackson said, meeting Yates's eyes. "We hit them hard and fast, strike at their heart, disrupt their command. We'll force them to fight on our terms. You realize this will probably get us all killed, right?" Yates asked, his voice strained. But even with the grim words, Jackson could see the flicker of understanding in his eyes. The colonel knew this was their only option. Jackson's jaw tightened. "We'll find a way. We always do." Ailey's voice broke through the tension. "You're not listening to me, Jackson. Valtar will retaliate. You're asking us to fight back when we don't even have the strength to hold our own. If you provoke him..." "I'm not asking, Ailey. I'm telling you. We're done with hiding. The galaxy doesn't get to decide our future. Earth decides. Ailey stared at him, her jaw set. She wanted to argue more, but she couldn't. He had already made up his mind. The passion in his eyes, that unyielding human fire, told her everything she needed to know. There would be no stopping him now. The hologram shifted, showing fleets of ships, alien warships, Voters' Command, growing closer. The countdown had begun. It was either fight or fall. Jackson turned to face them both, his gaze steady. If we don't stand up now, we might as well hand over our planet. So tell me, are we in this together? Silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. Ailey met his gaze. Slowly, she nodded. Then Yates, with a gruff growl, clenched his fist. We're in, Yates said. Let's finish this. Jackson exhaled, a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The war had already started. Now, all they had to do was survive it. The tension in the air was palpable as Jackson stood at the heart of the command center, staring down at the holographic projection of the approaching alien fleet. His pulse thrummed in his ears, but his expression remained impassive. The Council's final warning had been delivered, and the countdown to invasion had begun. Earth's fate rested in the hands of a few brave souls who were about to go against insurmountable odds. I can't believe we're actually doing this, Ailey muttered, standing beside Jackson, her hands clasped tightly together. The soft hum of the command center filled the silence between them as her gaze flitted nervously over the swirling images of the enemy ships. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about defiance. Jackson's jaw clenched, but his voice was calm. It's about showing them what it means to mess with humanity. His eyes were fixed on the fleet's advance, but his mind was elsewhere, calculating the next move, the next action. He knew what was at stake. He had known from the moment the Council had turned its back on Earth. Ailey didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned to Colonel Yates, who stood at a distance, his arms crossed as he surveyed the room. The colonel's posture was rigid, his steely gaze focused on the tactical map, but there was no mistaking the tension in his broad shoulders. You're not just sending us into the heart of their fleet, are you? Ailey asked, voice low and steady, yet carrying an edge of concern. This isn't a mission with a guaranteed outcome. Yates didn't flinch. His eyes met hers, sharp and unwavering. I didn't come here to lose. We're taking the fight to them, and we're hitting hard. There's no other way. Jackson felt the weight of Ailey's gaze on him, but he didn't flinch. The truth was, there was no guaranteed outcome. He had already accepted that the mission could be their last. But humanity had never been the type to back down, not even in the face of impossible odds. The stakes had always been high, but now, it was personal. How are we going to take out their command? Ailey pressed, her voice tinged with doubt, but also a flicker of hope. What's the plan, Jackson? He glanced over at the schematics on the table, his thoughts working over the blueprint of the enemy's technology. The alien fleet was vast, and its technology was far superior to Earth's, but Jackson had a secret weapon. Humanity had something that the aliens didn't fully understand yet, its unpredictability. We're hitting them where they least expect, Jackson said, his tone cool and decisive. A coordinated attack on their main command ship. If we take down their flagship, the rest of the fleet will fall apart. They're not prepared for us to strike first, not like this. Ailey's lips pressed together, and for a moment, Jackson saw her hesitation. She had always been the pragmatic one, the voice of reason. She knew what was at risk, but she also understood that this was humanity's chance to prove its resilience. All right, she said quietly, her voice steady but resigned. Let's do it. But you better be right about this. Because if we fail... We won't, Jackson interrupted, his voice firm. We're human. That's what makes us unpredictable. The colonel snorted. We've got that going for us, sure. Without wasting another moment, Jackson nodded to the team. The countdown was ticking down. It was now or never. As they filed out of the command center and into the transport bay, the the weight of the task ahead pressed down on Jackson's chest. The harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they suited up for the mission. The sound of armored boots echoed through the hallways as Earth's bravest, now including aliens like Ailey, prepared for what could very well be a one-way journey. Jackson caught Ailey's eye as they moved to their respective ships. For a brief moment, there was no tension between them, just a shared understanding. She nodded to him, her expression hard but resolute. She was with him, no matter what came next. They boarded their ships in silence, the hum of engines coming to life as they prepared for launch. Jackson's heartbeat quickened, and he felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just a mission. This was a statement. "All systems go," the voice from the comms came through, cutting through the silence. Jackson gripped the controls, his eyes narrowing on the approaching enemy fleet. It was a colossal force, intimidating in its size and firepower. But Jackson wasn't intimidated. He'd faced worse. He'd seen humanity pushed to the edge and come back swinging. As the fleet's ships filled the viewports, Ailey's voice crackled over the comms. "Ready for this, Jackson?" "Born ready," he replied, his words sharp and confident. The ships surged forward, cutting through the vastness of space as they headed straight for the heart of the enemy fleet. Jackson's eyes never wavered from the path ahead, the fate of Earth, and all of humanity, resting in his hands. The countdown had begun, and now it was time to show the galaxy that Earth was not to be trifled with. There was no turning back now. "Fire when ready," Jackson muttered, his finger hovering over the weapon's control. In the distance, the first of the alien ships began to fire. The war had officially begun. The cold void of space stretched out before them, an unbroken sea of black broken only by the firestorms of battle. Jackson's hands trembled slightly on the controls, but he kept his focus steady. The enemy flagship loomed ahead, its colossal form a shadow in the darkness. Its hull was a web of sleek, alien designs, much like the enemies it harbored within. In a way, it was the heart of their war machine. If it fell, the rest of the fleet would scatter like disjointed limbs. But first, they had to get to it. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Jackson barked over the comm, his voice sharp. His eyes flicked over to Ailey's ship, right beside his, a reassuring presence in the chaos. Ailey's voice came back through the comm, her tone steady but with a hint of something Jackson couldn't quite place. "You sure this is going to work? Their firepower's insane." "We don't have a choice," Jackson replied, his jaw tight. "We hit their flagship, we take their command structure. The fleet crumbles after that." "I hope you're right." There was a beat of silence before she added, "for humanity's sake." Jackson's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure if it was the adrenaline, the weight of their mission, or something else entirely. It was hard to keep his mind from wandering. They were so close to the end now. The beginning of the galaxy's view of humanity was written in the stars tonight, and whether they were ready or not, Earth's resilience would show through. A blinding flare erupted in front of them as enemy ships opened fire, launching waves of missiles and energy blasts that danced across the blackness of space. Jackson swerved, his ship darting to the right as debris exploded in front of him. He felt his stomach lurch with each jolt, but his instincts kicked in. He was a fighter, born for this. "Jackson, incoming!" Ailey's warning pierced through the noise, and Jackson threw his ship into a roll, narrowly avoiding a hail of laser fire. His teeth gritted together, but he didn't take his eyes off the target. "Keep it tight, Ailey. This is our moment." He pushed his ship forward, using every ounce of his skill to dodge enemy fire while staying on course. The flagship loomed larger now, its imposing size beginning to eclipse everything else. Jackson could practically feel the heat of the laser blasts slamming against his hull, but his determination was a steady pulse in his chest, driving him forward. The comms crackled with the sound of Colonel Yates' voice, harsh and distorted by static. "We've got their attention. Now's the time to strike. All ships, target the flagship's weak points. Jackson, you're up." Jackson's eyes flicked to his targeting systems. A flood of red markers highlighted the flagship's vital weak points, its propulsion engines, weaponry clusters, and shields. It was a moment of clarity amid the chaos. He exhaled slowly, forcing his mind to focus. "All right, Ali," he said, his voice low and focused. "We hit them together. I'll take out the weapon systems. You focus on the engines." "I'm with you, Jackson," she replied, her tone laced with resolve. They moved in tandem, a coordinated dance of destruction. Jackson unleashed everything his ship had, targeting the enemy's weaponry with precision strikes. The enemy flagship buckled under the force of their attack, its shields flickering, then collapsing under the barrage of missiles and energy blasts. Sparks erupted along the flagship's hull as explosions tore through its outer shell, the shockwaves reverberating through space. Jackson's heart raced. This was it, the moment they'd all been waiting for. "Now," he whispered, his finger hovering over the final command. But as he prepared for the last blow, something changed. A sudden flare of energy shot out from the flagship, a pulse of blinding light that distorted space itself. Jackson's eyes widened as a new, far more terrifying ship emerged from the flagship's belly, an enormous warship, its design unfamiliar, a beast of a vessel that dwarfed the others. It was faster, stronger, and heavily armed. "This wasn't in the intel," Jackson muttered, horror creeping into his voice. The new ship opened fire, the blast tearing through space like a hurricane. Jackson barely had time to react before the force slammed into his ship, sending it spiraling out of control. His stomach lurched as the stars around him twisted in a vortex of chaos. He fought to regain control, the ship shuddering under the strain of the near-fatal blow. "Jackson!" Ali's voice cut through the comms, panic threading her words. "Hang on." But Jackson was already struggling, fighting against the ship's damaged systems. The ship jerked wildly, the lights flickering before a burst of static overwhelmed the comms. He fought to keep his vision clear, pushing against the vertigo that threatened to overwhelm him. With a grunt, Jackson hit the emergency thrusters, pushing the ship back into a semi-stable orbit. He could hear the alarms blaring in the background, but his mind was too focused to give in to the fear. Come on," he muttered to himself, hands flying over the controls. Ali's ship came into view, having dodged most of the initial blast. She was holding her position, waiting for his signal. But the reality hit him, this wasn't over. They had underestimated the enemy. The war had just escalated to a level they weren't prepared for. And now, the real fight had begun.